Could you open the door? Why not? Do you know why?
They put a chair on it.
Oh, okay. Who did? Who put a chair behind it?
Barbie.
This little girl is named Lauren Canavar and she's 8 years old. But don't let the age fool you. Even though she is young, she would go through a lot considering her age. Now this little clip that you've just seen, the person that Lauren's talking about, the one that is called Barbie, is her mother, Barbara. Now this wasn't the first time that her mother and father would do such a horrible thing to Lauren. For years, these two parents, or if you want to really call them parents, have been tormenting this young girl by locking her in a closet for 24 hours a day. And when they were nice enough to give her some free time, the spare few minutes that she would have, she would be unbelievably mistreated, like in unimaginable ways. And just the images of this girl are gut-wrenching. Her injuries were so severe that doctors compared her injuries to actual Holocaust victims. And let's be honest, we all know what horrors they went through. So now this young girl having similar injuries to them, plus she was born into a peaceful neighborhood. So the question begs, how and why is this the case? And well, this is the truly heartbreaking story of the girl in the closet. Our story starts on April 12, 1993, at Texas Medical Center. Here will be the place and date where Lauren would enter into this world. But right from the get-go, her life wasn't going according to plan. Because as soon as she exited from the womb of her mother, Barbara Atkinson, Barbara would turn away from the baby because she had already decided to give up her newly born child up for adoption. Now, Barbara had no idea who the father was, so that was the main factor to all of this. She would also go on to admit that she had no connection to the child that was grown inside of her, and in fact saw it as a problem and a very unnecessary one. But either way, a woman by the name of Sabrina Canavar would be the first in line to adopt this child. She would actually be in the delivery room as she was waiting for her adopted child to be born. And for the next 8 months, her and her husband, Bill, would raise Lauren as though she was one of their own. But this happy tale wouldn't last long, unfortunately. In fact, around about that 8-month mark, the happiness would be stripped away from them as the biological mother, who randomly and suddenly decided that she wanted her baby back. And the reason this whole thing went through and how Barbara would get her child back was because the Canavar lawyers hadn't properly signed the paperwork that states the end of Barbara's rights. So unfortunately, they were forced to hand over Lauren. And of course, as you can expect, having someone so close to you and someone that you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with ripped away from you in a matter of days, which was something that would hit the couple hard. But that feeling wouldn't be nearly as great as 8 years later they would learn what happened to their adopted baby. And fun not so fun fact for you, this crime was so bad that it's considered the 3rd worst case of abuse in history where the child doesn't die. Over the course of the next few years, where there is a transition period, this is when Lauren goes back and forth between the Canavars and Barbara's household. And it was during this time when the Canavars would notice quite sudden strange marks on Lauren's body. This would be like red rashes and then scratches as well in very unusual places. And when they try to talk about it with her in the best possible way, the girl would always cry inconsolably. Now with this piece of information, the Canavars know that something suspicious is going on, and more importantly, something bad is going on. So Sabrina would take Lauren to the hospital to get her SA exam, but to her surprise, the doctor would refuse. So not really having a choice left, she would take Canavars would even petition in court to stop Barbara getting custody of Lauren because they fear the safety of Lauren is in grave danger, and they wanted to do anything that they could legally can to save their child from this unknown danger. And instead of taking this suspicion seriously, the judge actually reprimands the Canavars, saying that they're causing drama that could affect Lauren for the rest of her life, which ironically turns out to be quite the opposite. After a long year battling in court, Lauren, who was about 2 years old at this point, is given back to Barbara Atkinson. And while this is the moment and going forward that the life of Lauren was going to change and it would never be the same, this was also the last time that she would see the light of day for a very long time. During this time when Barbara had Lauren all to herself, she would begin to start denying Lauren of clothes, which already is bad enough, but hey, they're clothes at the end of the day, and you really don't need many. But then she would go on to start denying her food, which, I mean, it's terrible because a young girl like her needs nutrients to grow. But I guess even though this was bad enough, it would only get worse from here, because then she would start to deny her water. And on top of all that, when the girl started to cry because she's parched and she has no food in her belly, she would get thrown into a closet, and then there would be a gate in front of the closet. So yeah, now we're on the route of this being completely unacceptable. And eventually, when Lauren got big enough to the point where she could actually push the gate down, her mother would counteract that by locking the doors on the kid, who was about 3 years old now. And for the next 5 years, essentially, this closet would become into a jail cell. The closet was about 4 feet by 9 and literally became Lauren's home, which was inside of her actual home that she was meant to be living in. Inside her unwanted home, aka the closet, Lauren would sleep, live, breathe, and is forced to relieve herself in there because there's no bathroom in the absolute mansion that she's been given. And because of this bad hygiene, her body became riddled with rashes and sore burns from standing on filthy blankets and a dirty floor for months at a time. She would survive on cold soup, crackers, and the occasional tub of butter, which I could only imagine how bad this must have been. Her older brothers and sisters, which by the way, Barbara had 5 other kids from different fathers, would sneak in some of the butter that she would occasionally have. And the weird thing is, none of the other kids would get treated how Lauren was getting treated. And in fact, they were treated quite fairly. So it really made no sense on why Barbara had such a vendetta against Lauren. But anyways, the life of Lauren would only get worse from here. Her mother and her stepbrother, who was named Kenny, would frequently spit and taunt Lauren as she would sit there helplessly. They would make her macaroni and cheese, and then they would put it in front of her, make her chew the macaroni and cheese, but then make her spit it out. And the few times she was allowed to leave her prison cell, her experience in the outside world was far worse than just being lonely and sitting in such filth. Once outside in the home, she would get bullied by her parents. They would beat her with a paddle or burn her with cigarettes. Sometimes she was taken out to bathe because again she was sitting in her own feces and urine. But during her bath time, Barbara would dunk her head under the faucet and would begin to laugh when Lauren was struggling to breathe. They would also violate her in many other ways, and unfortunately included SA.
You start out crying, then you beg them, and then you just shut up because nothing's working and everything you do seems to make everything worse. So you just lay there and let them do whatever they are doing to you happen to you and try not to make a sound.
Now the story gets worse, unfortunately, when her parents are essentially using her as a toy for their twisted desires, as they would rent out her body to other people, both men and women, and they would allow them to do anything to her. And there would be one specific man that she would go on to call Candyman, because when it was his turn to do his heinous acts, he would wear a clown mask when he hurts her, and as the horrible acts were going on, country music would be blasted in the family's trailer as screams from Lauren would go on deaf ears, as again unimaginable things are happening to her, all while her biological mother allows it to happen and in fact encourages it to happen. And actually to this day, Lauren can't listen to country music because of the severe trauma and because it triggers horrible flashbacks of the horrors that she had experienced through. Now, when it comes to relatives of Lauren, they would rarely ask about how she was doing ever since she had to go back to court. But off the chances that, the Atkinsons got asked on how Lauren was doing, they would use every excuse in the world to show and to tell how she was okay and everything was just fine. They would also ask the Atkinsons why she was never present every time when they saw the family, which also they would make another random excuse, and somehow they were believed. Now CPS, or Child Protective Services, would also be at fault for this because, well, they never checked on the girl either, despite Barbie or Barbara is being sent multiple welfare checks that were supposed to be used on her baby's care, which of course, as me and you know now, it wasn't. So not only was Lauren let down by her family members, she was also let down by the government agencies and by the judge. But finally, at the age of 8, someone finally comes to the rescue and saves Lauren. June 11th, 2001, her stepdad Kenny would randomly walk up to the neighbor, who at the time were pretty good friends with, and once close enough he would tell her what he and Bobby called their little secret. He would take her inside the family mobile home, and the woman Janine Rivers thinks he's going to open up the closet and show her a stash of drugs. And to make it clear, the reason why Kenny told Janine isn't really clear. In fact, there was no reason to do so, but the police assumed that it was an act of revenge, because apparently he thinks Bobby is cheating on him. But either way, whatever the reason was, it didn't matter, because thankfully Janine would call 911, and the Dallas police quickly started knocking on the family mobile's home. And just like that, after suffering a miserable life for more than half a decade, Lauren's solitary confinement would come to an end. Officers rush in, and the first person to be on the scene, which his name was Larry McLean, asks on the whereabouts of Lauren while literally walking past the 8-year-old. Now you're probably confused, but you see, due to her malnourishment and abuse, Lauren wouldn't look her age at the time. And in fact, doctors would testify that when she was found, she was the size of a 2-year-old, which so happened to be the age when she was given back to her biological mother. And when the officers realized that 2-year-old looking girl was actually Lauren, he saw that she was so frail and barely looked to be more than 20 pounds in weight, which she was actually weighed in to 25 pounds. The doctors would obviously slowly start to pump nutrients back into her body, and doctors say that this method that they were using to do this procedure was specifically used for Holocaust victims, which shows you the extent to truly how starved Lauren's body was. Her esophagus was clogged with carpet fiber plastic and excrements. Her genitalia were mangled from prolonged violence and required extensive surgery to repair all the damage. Furthermore, since she practically never used it, Lauren didn't know how to use the bathroom or how to hold a pencil or a fork. She didn't know her ABCs, and the girl had never seen the sun or played with toys. But despite all of this dark and twisted horrible sickness that happened to her, the kid somehow managed to say cheese and smile when the detective was taking a photo of her. She would proceed to undergo rigorous counseling to undo again the years of torment and torture she went through.
Because she was supposed to be my mother, and she treated me like crap. She is supposed to love me and take care of me, and she tortured me.
Now, counseling would help, but since Lauren was so badly traumatized, there would be things that could never be changed, at least without giving it some time anyways. But Bobby and Kenny Atkinson would thankfully get arrested and charged with felony injury to a child. However, the district attorney doesn't file a SA charge on them. This is because he doesn't want to further traumatize Lauren, forcing her to get up and start reliving the experience that she went through. But in 2002, both Kenny and Barbara are convinced and sentenced to life in prison in Texas. This absolute horror story would make national news, and after almost a decade of not seeing their daughter, the Canavars were of course shocked when they learned what happened to their baby girl. And it was even more painful to hear the news, because well, they kind of figured out that something bad was going on and they couldn't do anything about it. Sabrina and Bill would readopt Lauren despite the long road ahead, and knowing that this would have a long-lasting effect on her mental health. But now Lauren has a loving family that would take care of her. But even so, she still suffers from anxiety and random fits of rage at school. And unfortunately, she regularly engages in self-harm in an attempt to block out her memories. She would briefly turn to drugs and alcohol when she turned about 12 years old. Furthermore, during the age of 12, she was victimized in a bad way by a close relative, this triggering a cascade of depression, causing her to attempt to end her own life on almost 36 times. However, Lauren says her turning point finally comes when she's placed in an alternative school, which is a non-traditional study environment, specifically for troubled kids. There she would meet other survivors from similar situations and realizes that, in fact, she's not alone. She would learn to live again, passing high school and enrolling into a local community college, where she studies psychology and hopes to become into a child counselor. She would go on to make appearances on shows like Dr. Phil to inspire other victims to be resilient and to fight the demons that haunt them, and to never give up.
Never give up on anything. No matter what the situation or math problem or whatever. Just makes me want to prove myself even more than what I've already proven myself.
But this story, as you saw on the title, doesn't have a happy ending. In 2018, Lauren, who is now 25 years of age, gets arrested on 3 counts of SA on a minor. She met the 14-year-old on Lauren Canovor's Facebook page, a place for inspiring and helping other crime victims. The charges were actually eventually dropped a year later, and prosecutors don't really say why. Still though, this Facebook page has been disabled. Now, one of the worst things about this is when during an interview, she would say the reason that she did things to it was because she never bonded with it. Yes, she didn't even call her daughter by her own given name. In the interview, she refers her as to it, saying, quote, "Out of sight, out of mind. I shut it away and I don't think of it." Now, think how evil you have to be to treat your own blood like that and not have the decency to call her child by her given name. But I guess what can you do? She's in jail now, and that's where she's going to be for a very long time.